You know, one of the most, if not the most important predictors of how an election is going to break is voter enthusiasm. You can tell a lot about how things are going to turn out by looking at how fired up the respective bases are, because it's the base that does the hard, grinding work of getting out the vote. Now, back in 2008, the Democrats were on fire. Hatred of George W. Bush, of course, and especially an adoring glow of the new Messiah who is going to bring hope and change at last to this blighted land. And on the Republican side, we had John McCain, whose campaign not even Sarah Palin could breathe life into. But things are different today. So let's bring in Steve Green and Scott Ott to gloat, pontificate, or gnash teeth, depending on our moods. Fellas, let's call this a tale of two cities. Let's compare sleepy, sustainable, progressive, boring Providence, Rhode Island, home of last week's liberal convention, the that should be Netroot Nation, and vibrant, exciting, prosperous, fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, home of Right Online, the conservative pundit convention. Now, Netroots Nation was by most accounts sour, depressed, and despondent. Famous Maoist agitator and failed administrative appointee Van Jones railed against the serial disappointment known as Barack Obama and told them essentially to go out there and hold their noses and vote for him again anyway. But at Right Online, I love how they have a red star there on Netroots Nation, by the way. Red star, you betcha. But at Right Online, which Steve Green and I attended, but Scott Ott didn't because the rampant sin of Las Vegas would have made his skin catch fire. Well, that was a different vibe, wasn't it, Steve? Not only the possibility of a win in the air, but the likelihood that napalm smell of victory was everywhere. So, Steve Green, was there one moment that stood out for you in terms of, hey, we're going to win this thing?
You know what? It was immediate. It was the very first event. As soon as we all got together at the cocktail reception, the first night, and this might seem rude or something, but that reception was also kind of a memorial for Andrew Breitbart. There was a microphone, and anybody who wanted to speak a few words about Andrew could take the mic and do that. But this was no funeral dirge. It was a wake. It was a happy, boisterous, cocktail-fueled wake.
Right.
People in back, including myself, we got to talking so loud you couldn't hear whoever was holding the mic, and they started getting a little offended up front. But you know
Shut
what?
up!
Most of these speakers, yeah, I mean no offense here. Most of these speakers, they were telling the story of that one time that they met Andrew and how great he was. But you know what, Bill? You were a close friend of his, and I know that you didn't take that noise as a bad thing, because it was a celebration, because we have something to celebrate. Compare that to the misery of CPAC in 2009. It's world apart. We're happy warriors again.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Hey, Scotty, you know, we missed having you there, but you've had an experience that Steve and I haven't had. You've run for office. How important is voter enthusiasm in terms of winning elections, having been on both a win and a loss?
Well, enthusiasm is very important, but it is not determinative. I mean, unless that enthusiasm is backed by a willingness to do the hard things that most people don't like to do, for example, go out and knock on the doors of your neighbors and hand them information and answer their questions, or pick up the phone and actually call people, or help people to get to the polling places. Unless all of that happens, your enthusiasm is for naught. Blogging about it, posting things to Facebook, really has minimal impact. It is that personal connection, a handshake connection with people, that conveys that enthusiasm in a legitimate, authentic way and gets them there. You know, very early on, when I first started stepping into the local political realm, I had a consultant tell me that the conservative Christians used to be very engaged and involved in the local Republican Party, and then the establishment people kind of pushed them out. And he was kind of glad they were gone because he didn't like what they stood for. However, you know what he said? He said, it's really hard to get anything done anymore because the Christians would actually go out and do stuff.
Well, I think it's time for us to go out and do stuff, folks. Steve, they opened the convention by welcoming us to the Venetian where it was held, which they called the largest building in the world and the only casino on the Strip to be non-union. Now, they followed that by saying it was also the one with the highest wages and the best benefits package in town. So how did it feel to be surrounded by all that prosperity, luxury, and competence after nearly 4 years of watching Obama's class warfare?
You know, I just rub it in. But just as someone who has no interest in gambling at all, I can tell you, the Venetian doesn't suck.
No.
And it's a non-union shop. Listen, I'm not surprised. Sheldon Adelson, it's his company that owns the whole Venetian Palazzo complex there. This is the kind of guy he is. Let me tell you, when the financial shock of 2008 hit, it almost bankrupted his company. So he put up $1 billion of his own money to save it, a cool billion. And every year he puts on the Support Our Troops event where he invites dozens of wounded warriors and wives and husbands and even a couple of dads to come to his hotel, stay in the best rooms, eat the best food, see all the best shows. And he does this out of his own pocket, about $2 million a pop every year. This isn't a corporate thing, it's his thing. So it doesn't surprise me he treats his employees so well. That's real generosity, and it doesn't come from a Washington bureaucrat.
No, it does not. Well said, Steve. He's a great guy. And speaking of those evil one percenters, Scotty, let me tell you a quick story. That first night, Steve and I were coming out of a restaurant at the Venetian, and a waiter came chasing after me holding my check. And I thought, oh man, I almost got away with it. Usually it works, but this time I thought, my God, they got me. But anyway, turns out he stopped me to let me know that the tip I'd included was not necessary, been built into the price, and I hadn't seen it. He ran me down all the way out into the lobby to tell me I had paid him too much tip. So I had him keep the extra 20% as an honesty bonus on the tab. Now that's at a non-union casino. Does this little story tell us something about the bigger choice that's facing us in November? Two different visions of how to run the country?
Well, I think a union could have accomplished that as long as they had some sort of honesty quota that had to be met. I mean, you know, if he had to get one more, you know, honest action to meet his honesty quota, he might have done that. And I couldn't help but looking at that picture of the Venetian and wondering whether those guys in those boats were actually from the International Brotherhood of Festively Dressed Gondola Pilots. I mean, those guys could certainly bring joy to the lives of people who are staying in that hotel. You know, fundamentally what this gets down to is a lifestyle of joy, a pursuit of happiness that imbues everything you do. And frankly, whether the polls are up or the polls are down, or our numbers in Congress are up or down, there is a happiness about clinging to the truth and beauty of conservatism that they can never take away from us, no matter what happens at the ballot box.
That's right. And it wasn't lost on me, by the way, that just about anybody who works hard in this country every year, or at least every other year or so, can come to a place like that and live like an emperor for 3 days. Just never been anything like it in the history of the world. Anyway, my friends, I had a chance to speak to some very smart and knowledgeable people in private over at Right Online, not like we three idiots. I'm talking about real smart people who make predictions for a living. Now, I'm not going to go into details over casual conversations, but they believe, and I believe, that if we keep this up, we're going to put an end to this socialist hope and change nightmare in 4 months' time. So keep a smile on your face, a song in your heart, and never forget the wisdom of that great American patriot, Han Solo.
I got him! Great kid! Don't get cocky!
For PJTV, I'm Bill Whittle.